Welcome, everybody, to Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel, Inc. I'm Pete Wright, and once again, we are coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee, at the NACUBO 2015 annual meeting, where Howard Teibel is officially holding court. Howard, how are you?
Court in our Biodome suite. We're even closer to Pluto at this point, and right? I'm actually getting used to this being here. I no longer want to go outside.
That's it. You shouldn't need to, right? It's homeostatic, I think is the word.
I'm a little afraid with the rebreathing of what we're rebreathing. That's what it is. To be plain.
We have, once again, a dear friend of the show, Mike Gower, coming to us. He's a Senior Vice President for Finance and Treasurer for Rutgers. Mike, welcome back.
Thank you, Pete. Glad to be here.
You have your hands in just about everything, apparently. So you're becoming a staple on the show. And new to the show, I'm very excited. We have a new guest, Bob Shea, former CBO himself, current Senior Fellow for Finance and Campus Management at NACUBO. Bob, welcome to Navigating Change.
Thanks, Pete. It's great to be here.
Today we're introducing our audience to a project that you are spearheading, as I understand it, Bob, the Economic Models Project at NACUBO. Now, I know the three of you are all up to speed and on what this is. I am I would like to say, fantastic guinea pig for you. I know nothing about it, and I hope that my ignorance of it will serve as a model for others as you introduce this thing. So, Bob, could you start us off? Tell us, what is the Economic Models Project, and then you can each kind of take turns sharing your roles.
Sure. The genesis of the Economic Models Project started last year officially. NACUBO's board, being pretty visionary, looked at the industry and saw that higher education as an industry from external stakeholders is under extensive scrutiny. Tuition has risen over the last 2 decades to be a more significant portion for families to finance their children's education, and there's a whole litany of reasons why the board wanted to move forward. So there's in the East and in the West, there's declining demographics for students, so that has pressure on revenue. There's changing demographics with different immigrant groups, so we need to look at bilingual opportunities in higher education. So there's a whole bunch of external things happening where our board wanted to look at the economic models. A contemporary example is what happened with Sweetbriar. Sweetbriar, the private women's college in Virginia, is going through a very interesting and difficult process of going out of business. Their board and their cabinet made a decision to go out of business, and they lost a lawsuit recently. So the economics hasn't changed. I don't think the outcome will change at all. But that's just a national picture of what's going on in our industry. A decline in students, a decline in revenue from state sources, pressure on philanthropy for private schools, and what has been an issue with higher education over the last 20 years, significant growth of tuition and fees above CPI over the last 20 or 25 years. So those are some of the pressures that our board wanted to look at. So over the course of the last 6 months, the project really got going in earnest in February when we hired another former chief business officer, Dr. Jacqueline Askin, from Phoenix, Arizona. She joined us, and over the course of the last 6 months, we've been meeting with different constituent groups throughout higher education. We've conducted 14 focus groups. We've had a virtual focus group where people who can't make it to our focus groups get to give us their opinion via the internet. So we now have over 1,100 data points from these focus groups that we've met with.
Here's what was interesting for me, seeing how this has evolved. I think you can tell, Pete, that what we have here is how to tell the story, and at its foundation, that the problem that higher ed deals with is the fact that not only do we have different ways of telling our story, we all have a different view of what priorities are. We have different language Then there's language across the aisle. So there are so many reasons why I think this project is beginning to uncover all of the factors that contribute to why this industry moves together in one way, but also why it's lagging and they're not getting momentum. And in many ways, I see this project as getting the right constituents together to begin to have a shared conversation.
I think this is one of the most important initiatives that NACUBO has ever done. It is going to provide us language, definitions, concepts, things that we can communicate both externally and internally. We have a multitude of business models or economic models in higher education. And just in my institution, we have dozens and dozens. If you think about, the differences between running professional schools and undergraduate schools, or between running football or running dining and running extension services or bus services and so on. There's a lot of dynamics there. And even at the high level, at the mission level, there are different economic models between education and research. And if we don't know what we're dealing with there, we can't move towards sustainable models.
Right.
And I think the sustainability is one of the critical reasons of doing this, because many of our business models are no longer sustainable. So then what? What are we going to do?
Right. And we're anticipating, sustainability sometimes is equated with survival, right? And I think sustainability is a view of, if we don't start thinking differently, things are not going to change overnight, but we're going to wake up one day and see that we don't have an approach really to think forward. So the story that I think you guys are getting ahead of is not just how to get through it, but how to focus on thriving.
I would agree with that.
But you got to start somewhere.
Surviving isn't enough.
Surviving isn't enough. That's what Sweetbriar is going through.
Yeah. If you get to that point, you got a whole nother set of problems.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason, there was a strategic reason why the board wanted to do it, but there's also a communication reason why they wanted to do it. If you read the op-ed pages in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times and the Chronicle and Inside Higher Ed, you would think that every college and the university is doing a lousy job and students aren't graduating and getting jobs and doing great things. Nothing could be further from the truth. The contemporary narrative in the national press is that higher education is broken. It's not. To just expand on Howard's point, it's important that we do this project to get to the sustainability so that higher education can continue to drive the value that they have for generations in America. It's one of the best things about the American system is our higher education system. And just a little personal anecdote. I'm a working class kid from a Boston family, and I only got my education because of open access public institutions. And through that, I got a love for learning, and then was fortunate enough to get graduate degrees from 2 elite public universities. I would love to replicate that opportunity for others. That's why Mike and Howard and I are passionate about this. It's to extend the opportunity that American higher education has given to generations of Americans, and we want to be able to replicate that.
Yeah, and it goes beyond, it is very much providing that opportunity, but let's all recognize also that providing those educations and those opportunities for the students now and the students to come will help to solidify what is an occasionally shaky economic condition in the United States.
That's right. To be able to weather those unanticipated future downturns, because right now, I think that a lot of schools, if they have some minor shifts in tuition or enrollment, they're in trouble. They're right on the edge, and they're doing what they've done every year, which is focusing on getting through the next year's budget. So I think, Pete, that this is really about, NACUBO in its role in higher education with business officers is in my view, taking a leadership position and a stand around this. What's fascinating about that is that if you ask different constituents, if you ask academics, they often think that they should be driving the conversation. You ask trustees, they think they should be driving the conversation. I think it's a matter of that NACUBO is demonstrating a way that they can do it and then bringing in all those other bodies to play a role. I don't disagree that other groups can't take a lead on this, but there's no question, and you can see it in the advisory group, the amount of interest and engagement. And this is going to become, Pete, just if you think about the culmination, tell me if this is right, a tool for different leaders in different sectors in higher ed to look at and say, what are the levers that we should be pulling based on the constraints we have and the nature of our kind of higher ed, whether it's community colleges, whether it's research, whether it's comprehensive small level arts. That's the distinction we don't make. Some of the small ones, some of the schools individually have serious problems you can call they're broken. The mistake we make is we have this
lumping everybody into the
overarching,
same category.
It's all broken.
Right.
Yeah.
We love the narrative of the broken school. We love it because we have done such a good job in the media of characterizing U.S. education as way too expensive, not really, addressing the impact of inflation over time and the cost of education. Like, there are a number of these sort of sensationalist narratives that we love. It sounds to me like what this project is helping is really to create that foundational stage, or the foundational armor framework for each of these other constituent audiences to be able to actually operate with a broader set of data. Is that what your objective is? I mean, really to provide that foundation for academics, for boards, and I think specifically to you, Mike, as an acting CBO right now, how do you expect to be able to implement the whatever sort of tools come out of this project?
This tool is facing two directions. It's facing inward and it's facing outward. The inward part is, and both of them are about communications. The inward part is having, we're trying to move towards a common language, a common way of looking at how our programs are put together, so that the academic leadership who really need to drive the mission have context, have appropriate information, have frame of references in the economic side of things, so as to make the trade-offs, to make the choices, to consider the alternatives and consider the consequences. But it's also so that both they and we as business officers can communicate outward as well, to get a better handle on the myths that are going out about higher education. A lot of these discussions about the $60,000 university. Well, those are such a small component of maybe not the number of universities, but the number of students who are served in the United States.
That's right.
Whereas most of higher education is driven out in the public realm. But we need to be able to communicate to parents, to legislators, to governors, to other policymakers in Washington and elsewhere of what it really is, what is really going on.
And two of the products that will come out of this are definitely communication projects that Mike talks about, both internal and external. The first deliverable that will come out of this project is a white paper that will talk about the current state of higher education economic models, how we got to where we are today. And we'll use as a starting point for that 1948 with the signing of the GI Bill. That was the democratization of higher education. When soldiers came back, soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marine came back from World War II, colleges and universities went through a huge building boom on the faculty side, on the physical infrastructure side. That was the starting point of where we are today. So we'll go from then up until today. And then some of the work that we started here yesterday in a great session was, what are some envisioned future states of the higher education economic model? That's really hard work. And one of the points Mike talked about, the internal communication challenges, is talking with the academic side of the house. One of the things we're really proud about this project, we reached out to a wide range of folks, including provosts, 2 groups of provosts and groups of ACE fellows, which are academics who want to be academic administrators and college provosts and university presidents. One of those fellows, Audrey Bilger, who's a faculty member at Claremont McKenna in California and did her ACE fellowship year at UC Riverside in California, wrote for us in Business Officer magazine a essay titled "It's Not Us versus Them," meaning faculty against business officers, that we all have to collaborate if we want this economic model to be sustainable, and if we need to if we want to change to make this opportunity for American higher education available to a wide range of folks.
You know, there's so much more that we could say about that adversarial relationship, or the perception of that adversarial relationship. When I think, when I vision out what's going to happen with this, and why I think this is so powerful, is that we've been telling a story to business officers for the longest time. We need you to play a more strategic role. And what's fascinating about that is that there are some that do, because that's sort of how they approach their work, but many of them don't know how to navigate that conversation. And I think this project is actually going to be challenging many more business officers in a positive way to say, you now have some things you can use. When I think out what's going to be the next step in terms of the success around this, will be to really be empowering those individuals to then say, all right, I'm going to play that leadership role in my institution. It's one thing to have the data. And many of you, I know you, Mike, you approach your work that way. I know a lot of other business officers do, but I also know many others that actually, they're not going through the motions, but they don't feel like they are a leader. So I think that the potential here is to enable them to actually say, all right, we don't have a reason that we can still hold back. We have the data we need. Now we just have to show some chutzpah.
At last year's board meeting, when John Walden, NACUBO's president, and Mary Herron, who was last year's chair, announced this project, they both referenced the need for bold leadership by chief business officers.
Well, and that is, it's part of the mission of the organization, and it's the strategic goal. When Bob referred to the board initiating this project, that it initiated this project. It came up through the last strategic planning process and said, we must provide these capabilities and tools and opportunities to our members so that they can be the strategic leaders in these discussions.
Right.
If we don't do that, shame on us.
Right.
If we don't do that, our institutions are at risk.
As we get toward winding down here, I wonder, I mean, you said, Bob, that you have been collecting a ton of data, it sounds like it. Do you have any initial insights? Have you started pulling together those insights? Anything that has jumped out at you that has supported or surprised you in the work that you're doing?
That's supported and surprised.
Yeah, that's a great segue, because it feels like you might have sat in our session yesterday afternoon. We brought together 78 chief business officers and about 25 senior members from our industry partners, exhibitors, sponsors, consultants, bankers, together to talk about this very difficult issue. And the question that we asked of all the focus groups was this: what strategic issues, spoken or unspoken, on your campus are inhibiting you from moving to a sustainable economic model?
What was great about this was that Bob stopped and said, what do you think I mean by unspoken? And somebody immediately answered.
Someone said sacred cows.
Sacred cows.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the intent. We were very intentional in putting spoken or unspoken, because if you understand the culture of higher education, you understand that in some meetings, some topics are verboten.
Right. But I'll tell you something here as an observer and participant. I think we also have to be conscious of making sure that we remain being bold in this project, because there's the challenge, because I see this in lots of places where we know how many constituents we need to be respectful of, but there's a place where I cannot tell you the number of times I've seen people step back from being bold because of the risk associated with it. This project could suffer from that same thing. And to me, it's just a reminder that we have to keep reminding ourselves, what does it mean for us to be bold? And being bold has a risk associated with it.
Right.
There's no guarantee. I mean, you are going to ruffle some feathers here. And you know what? Maybe you should be, but in a way that shows respect and demonstrates that how much you care deeply about it. And it's not about offending, but it's about putting some of the brutal facts on the table.
I want to answer explicitly. You had asked what are some of the themes that are coming out from the research that we've compiled over the last 6 months. And across each one of the 14 groups that we've met with, there's 5 themes. The first one is resource allocation, revenue, expenditure, and investment issues. The next is higher education are labor-intensive organizations. So all of those things that come with labor-intensive organizations, salary and benefit costs, across the administrative spectrum, across the academic spectrum, across the auxiliary spectrum. Next is capital considerations, the ubiquity of technology, the facilities arms race, the issue of both organizational debt and student debt. Next is the external environment. We are large ecosystems with shared governance. Mike talked about the complexity of Rutgers earlier. I think that is indicative of the complexity of a research institution, but that they're the largest, most complex organizations, but even small 2,000 student liberal arts colleges are complex ecosystems on their own. And then last,
but certainly not least,
certainly not least, is the issue that went across every single issue that came up across each one of those 14 groups was the issue of leadership, the organizational behavioral challenges of dealing with culture, of dealing with structure, of dealing with policy, and having, again, that courage and the character to take these issues on.
This is the most important one.
Well, it gets back to your point a minute ago about being bold.
Yeah.
So
we got to start with where we are, right? Mm-hmm. And where we are is, you're inventing something that you're going to be inviting people outside of this inner circle to say, be bold. I'm going to say the story starts with this group being bold. And what does that mean? And it's a question more than an answer. It's a tough one because it doesn't have a clear linear path. And it's got risk associated with it. But of any of those issues, the other ones are important, but the driver for change is leadership.
Well, and that leadership is not command and control. Leadership has got to be influence, persuasion,
collaboration.
That's right.
Communication.
Yep.
Involving in the information.
That's right.
All those elements, and it command and control will just lose us.
This is it's a wonderful story, and it's fantastic to showcase it here because we love talking about work that is capital I important, and that's what this feels like. What is your timeline for releasing your first white paper as we start seeing these resources hit the streets?
Great question. We hope to have the first white paper concluded by the end of this calendar year. So maybe we can promise it as a Christmas present. Or maybe a Hanukkah present.
Was that for me?
Yeah, why not?
I just wanted – yeah, of course it was.
Okay.
It could have been on Mike.
And it's a 2-year time frame, Pete. We're looking at releasing the first white paper sometime late in the fall. The second one that talks about the future states of the higher education economic model sometime prior to our annual meeting next year in Montreal. And the third and most definitive product is something that we're calling the discussion guide. We need to have a conversation around the name for that, but that will be an extensive guide that will help our members walk through the difficult cultural, structural, and policy change that they need to do to get to a sustainable economic model.
Yeah, that's the real toolkit, if you will.
Exactly.
So that we've got to equip all the business officers out there, whether they've had the tradition of pushing this envelope or not, give them something to work with.
including the rise of the swell of new business officers in the next 3 years. Think about the education they're going to receive from this.
And ones that are coming from outside of higher education.
No
which
question.
Is even
that more important.
More challenging for them as individuals.
Oh, absolutely. Pete?
That gets to my final question for anyone who wants to jump on this one in particular. We have, with our audience, fantastic business officers and provosts and presidents. Do you have any particular call to action? What would you like them to take away and be thinking about as you are working to build this set of fantastic resources?
I'll answer that. So here's I'll start. Get ready. Get ready for having tools that you may not have had in the past, and the muscle to start developing is practicing taking risks, because I think that risks is about doing something, seeing that you survived, doing it again, and seeing that you can produce a better or more profound outcome because you do it. It's a practice skill. It's not going to happen overnight. So this is something you start with. When this stuff becomes available, you're going to have even more tools to move this thing forward. What about you, Bob?
The call to action for me is we've actually used the framework for our call to action. There's a guy at Harvard Business School by the name of John Carter who has a framework for change, and there's eight things that he says you need to institute change in an organization, or in our case, in industry. And NACUBO thinks that we can really impact the first 5. There's 8, and I'll read all 8. The first one is a sense of urgency. That's what we're doing right now. The second is building a powerful guiding coalition. Again, NACUBO's work with all our outreach with the focus groups. Creating a vision. That started yesterday with engaging with over 100+ people to ask them what was the most important. Communicating the vision, part of what we're doing here today, and empowering others to act on that vision. Those are the 5 things that we think NACUBO can really do, and that's our call to action. Howard just talked about it a little bit in number 6, is plan for and create short-term wins. So you get that success, you do it again, that gives you the courage of your convictions to move forward. 7 is consolidate improvements and produce more change. And lastly, number 8, institutionalize new approaches. That new approach is those new business models that we'll be talking about, in that toolkit that we will be giving to our member CBOs.
What about you, Mike? When you think about call to action, what comes to mind for you?
Starting the conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to wait till the white paper is out to start the conversations about what are these considerations at my place or at your place. These are going to be tools that will be available, but those conversations need to start. They really need to be going through the academic leadership, the faculty, the administrative leaders, all those, the trustees. So we don't have to wait to do that. We can get those concepts out there, and then the tools will be available to us to continue and to promote, continue the conversation and promote action, but don't wait for them.
Outstanding. That's a great way to leave us. Thank you very much, all of you. Mike Gower at Rutgers University, thank you for your time today, sir.
Pleasure.
And Bob Shea, I hope that you will come back, because I feel like this is a story that will have many more chapters over the course of the next year.
He'll be back.
Thanks, Pete.
With that Hanukkah present.
And Howard Teibel, I hope you are released from the Biodome shortly.
I'm leaving here shortly and then heading to Alaska.
Oh, geez.
So, yeah, don't even get me started. I'm excited.
All 3 of you coming from the NACUBO 2015 annual meeting is just closing up shop today in Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for downloading and listening to the show. Don't forget, you can find out more about us at TeibelInc.com. Subscribe to the show for free in iTunes. Make sure you don't miss a single episode, just like this one. We appreciate your time and attention. Thanks, everybody. Until next week, I'm Pete Wright. We'll catch you on Navigating Change, the podcast from Teibel Inc.